winter of 2022, two cannabis workers set out to gain more perspective on what it's like to work for the East Coast's first legal cannabis industry. Who's making all the decisions? Who's making all the money? And who's doing all the work? Find out on Behind the Bud. Tonight's episode, Alex.
Okay, ready? And here we go. We are Behind the Bud with your hosts, D-Day, Indovelli, and Caddy D. Did you want to actually use like a moniker or anything? Like Alex. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for being here, Alex. We appreciate you being here. Alex actually worked for the same company that I used to. Oh, yeah. We're not going to name them, obviously, because we don't want to get into any legal trouble. We like to call it the evil empire down the street. Yeah, the evil empire down the street.
Oh, yeah.
Would you agree that that's a good name for them?
Yeah, they're just like the Walmart of weed, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You know?
Especially in our state, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, mass cannabis, once rec hit, as far as I could tell, every single place, including, where I used to work, quality went down stupendously. It was a whole letter grade and a half of difference.
Like, would you say it was like when rec hit, though?
Yeah, pretty much as soon as, everything amped up for that. Because, just like your guys saying, as soon as you ramp up, quantity of production, you're talking about, filling a massive grow space. Every square inch has got plants in it. They're just trying to produce as much quantity as is possible. That's the goal, because they can test it and do whatever they want after the fact. Once it's tested, as long as it's good to go, it's good to go. So they can just send it.
Did you ever work in production at all?
No. I've been to the production facility a few times.
I was hired, it was after COVID. So they didn't even... they sort of held that over our heads, like we're, someday we'll get to experience that. And
it was probably after they unionized the Franklin grow space, and they
actually unionized it.
Yeah, as far as I know, I think with the 1445, I'm pretty sure the grows. Yeah, they wouldn't tell you guys that because like cultivation, they were trying to. I think they were trying to say that weed cultivators, like the company, right?
Sure.
They're saying that they're not part of it's not agriculture. And so they wouldn't be covered by certain things and certain rules would apply to them basically. And it's they're growing plants. Yeah, this is agriculture. What are you talking about?
So what did they say they were if they weren't agriculture?
Yeah, exactly. They were cultivator, whatever, some generic word. I mean, it's just the argument is always very
interesting,
hollow. Fight. It's one of those things where they just hope they're going to, like any big corporation, they're going to hope you don't know, either
don't ask, don't
what
tell.
Your rights are, or, what, I think anything is. There's a lot of stuff like that. Business, unfortunately, brings out some of the worst qualities.
When did you start working at the Evil Empire down the street?
It was years ago. It was pre-pandemic. So I was there for maybe 2 years. I think I finished up right around when the pandemic, from basically a year prior to rec. Through rec, basically the first year of rec.
So you saw the transition.
Yeah, I saw the transition. Rec. I saw, the place we were at was always, I would say, probably one of the busiest, if not the busiest. We'd probably do estimate maybe 10 times the numbers of some other dispensaries on any given day.
Yeah.
Just because, if you're the biggest and you're the first, it makes sense. People know you're there. You're there. Right. You're established.
That brand recognition.
You're close to everything, Mm-hmm. And then if you're the first to do rec and no one does rec for months or whatever.
It was, by my recollection, it was a good, 8 months to a year before even the third dispensary that was adult use opened up. I can't remember what it was, but it was an absurd amount of time.
Oh, yeah. They had the market cornered for quite a while, by happenstance. And they made, I can't even fathom how much money, so much money.
You worked in medical before, Indo.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm going to call them the chum bucket to your evil empire.
The chum bucket.
I was I think the general term would be patient service associate, and I did other things for that company.
PSA.
PSA. And so, but when I was leaving, we were under new management. They wanted to call us guides. Yeah. Very ambiguous. Compliance was a big thing, and that was a big part of our job. In terms of compliance, I was very strict on that stuff because it's know the rules. You can't, because a lot of it people might not know is that we bear the brunt of, the company ultimately does, but we bear the brunt of responsibility when we're dealing with any of this stuff. There was a situation once, and this is so stupid, but it's helping a patient, and they had purchased a bunch of joints. And at the time, what you had to do You scan each thing, and then you'd have to put on a sticker that was one for what this is, and then another one that it was like medical. So you had 2 stickers that you had to like put on each joint. They got like 3 dozen joints or something like that. And at some point, while I was putting joints into the bag, one of the flags from the stickers you fold over got caught and it fell out and it was on the ground. 20 minutes later, one of the like team leads was like, "Oh shit, it looks like there's a J on the ground." And I was like, "Oh crap, this is from my last patient," because I recognized it. And I went up to the manager and was, "Hey, like, I found this and this happened." And they were like, "Oh, thank you for telling us, but also like, it's a strike basically. And like, we know accidents happen, but blah, blah," because, the patient ended up fine with it. They were like, "Oh, like, yeah, no problem." I've been talking to them for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. It was all copacetic. And, accidents happen. Like, "Oh yeah, I'll just come by another day and I'll pick it up tomorrow," or something like that. They either put it in the vault or I don't forget exactly what they did. It's like stuff like that where it's like you accrue a few of those mistakes and they basically put it on you, or it's like you're fired. And I think that they had to be very strict with compliance, but I also think it's a built-in feature to penalize people and keep them from sticking around too long. I don't think they want anyone to get too cozy. Me and another coworker, we were doing a sweep because the CCC or someone, whatever, was going to be coming by. Yeah, like basically an audit. Prior to making sure we had all of our medical stuff, whatever, it all recreational stuff's all like set up basically. Right. And we're walking down, and I just see like, as we're going down, I'm like looking on the ground because like, rug nugs are a thing. I was there when we were still doing the wafting.
Wow. Yeah. So like, can you describe that process to some of our listeners? Because like a lot of people watching this would probably not be familiar with this process. We don't have this in Massachusetts anymore.
I can't say, at the time I have not been at every single dispensary, but it was pretty uncommon as far as I know. But, you would come up and it'd be medical, right? And you would be like, "Oh, I want to smell, or I want to see the GG number 4 or Gorilla Glue number 4 or whatever," and you'd be like, "Okay, cool." And you would take a Tupperware container that had all the scannable information on it somewhere in a tag, and you basically would like open it up, and you'd be standing at arm's length from them. You kind of cut an angle and you use the lid, you waft the weed in the direction they can look at it, and we're hand weighing out weed. So like, I'm grabbing a nug and I'm like throwing it, I'm scaling it out, and I'm like,
by hand or with tongs?
By hand.
You just don't know on a scale, right?
Yeah, and we have a scale on a cup, so I'm weighing out, or we're weighing out. So it's a hand picked, thing of weed. But then we started doing fresh packs because fresh packs, because it's faster, because it's prepackaged, and so we started doing that. And people would be doing like hundreds of these things. I'm not even kidding. Like individual people would be packing like dozens to like sometimes like hundreds of those. Some people got hired like to just do fresh packs. They'd come in the morning and they would just they'd send them, "Oh, you got to do like side work every morning, every single person. You got to fill 60 fresh packs or whatever it is." All of us. We also had to clean. I dreamed
of being able to handle that much weed in my course of my work. Is everything's already prepackaged. And you're basically like working at a fucking Apple store with weed packages inside of it.
It's really atrocious.
It is really awful.
It's repetitive, as much repetitiveness as you can get.
Oh yeah.
It's just like assembly line with weed.
So they went on to fresh packs, and after that, we only would do wafting weed for med patients, at the time, and then after that, it was just basically because also like what would happen sometimes is that like very rarely, but like at least 2 or 3 times to me, you'd show people weed like, "Oh, I want that one," and they'd literally like fucking like like touch the weed, and then basically what would happen is I'd have to call them a TL over or inventory specialist, and then they'd be like, "Oh, they touched this area," so they basically go through and just like take out that area of nugs, and they'd have to waste it. And
contaminant,
because you can't. I mean, like the thing is too is like you gotta imagine, like you see me there, I'm like literally putting on gloves and then doing the thing and then taking off gloves and like typing stuff and then putting on gloves again if I happen to need.
Right.
So it's like you gotta wonder if some people they get excited. There's a lot of vestiges of like the cultures kind of colliding where it's like this used to be like a cottage industry sort of situation, and it went very corporate very quickly. People that would buy weed on the street or of a dealer or whatever, it's a completely different relationship than going to a store where there are cameras and someone will lose their job if you do something stupid. There's like so much more that goes on in the background of that.
Absolutely.
That like one, it's just like I'm not even going to single out like just like cannabis industry, every industry, there's all these things that are baked into how things just are. Like we are given a very misrepresented actuality of a lot of the time, and I can't say this about every company or everything, but it's not an uncommon practice in cannabis where like if you have weed that is moldy or otherwise like not able to be sold, as like bud, that gets reclaimed. And like from what I understand, companies will just make concentrates out of those products that are undesirable. And from a business sense, like it makes sense because you're like, oh, I have like 100 pounds of flour, and it's like, but if we make these concentrates and we distill it and make distillate or whatever, we are only extracting active ingredient, and there should be nothing else, provided that the testing and all that's legitimate, and that's a whole other conversation. But provided that we can trust that they're not like, oh, this is full of heavy metals, send it. Provided that that's all true, there's no mold.
Right. Can you speak to that, Indo? Sort of like,
oh yeah, man. I mean, I got a story for you. When I used to work at the Chum Bucket, that same exact scenario happened where they had a bunch of moldy weed, and let's just say I was there when they had a couple like meetings in that room where they were just holding all the batches. There's a metric room where when everything's weighed in and weighed out, you put it in that same room
system,
right? Yeah. So you just wait. Once everything's on record, you just wait, and then you go in and you grab it. Same shit, right? So that's where they were having that discussion. I don't know what pertaining to the details of this, except about not even a week later, I knew that same batch number in that same strain was still released onto the retail side, right? Which is like, I was shocked. I was like,
as bud?
It was as bud. It was as bud.
Really?
Wait,
yes.
What?
Whoa. Yeah, it was as bud. It was testing like shit, right? So they basically
like
had
14% something.
So they took the bags and they brought it back into the packaging room, and they were like, okay, guys, take all of that. They cleaned off the table, and they were like, we need you to sort through all these bags right here. There's 3 bags. It was a hush move. They wanted to get it done, right, within 45 minutes or an hour, whatever. And they were just like, let's sort through all the bad buds right now. And then whatever we get remaining, we're going to probably go to extracts and let them work with that.
Yeah.
So everybody's like, okay, we'll salvage it. So I come and find out, essentially what they did was they took whatever they salvaged for the bud. They did a hot sale. That same weekend, that like it was during the weekend.
Get rid of it. It's
and
gone.
Then that hot sale was during the weekend, right? And their whole spiel was that they wanted to honor the weekend for all their elderly patients with low testing buds that won't overdo their shit. And at that point, that's when I was just, I can't even.
Straight marketing. It's fucked.
It's just but that's how you operate in the gray area, and you make some, like you said, making money. You maximize profit, bro.
That's right. And it's like saying with livestock, it's that situation where you're growing, you're feeding these cows corn, and they should be eating grass, and you're fattening them up in 6 months instead of 2 years. I mean, that's a big problem where you've grow facilities. There were some reports with people where they, had the HVAC system tested.
Oh yeah,
at undisclosed companies' names grow up, and there was like mold in the HVAC system because those weren't being managed.
Gross.
It's just super. I mean, it's just an unpleasant part of it where especially at our company when I started, it was pre-rec, and it was like super like, oh, we're like startup vibes, and we're trying to make cannabis a legitimate thing, and cannabis is medicine, and I was like very gun-ho like the first year in a big way. And there's just a lot of nepotism in this, and like a lot of situations where like there's a trainer position. Now I trained probably like 24 employees. When it came time for promotions to actually promote, they were like, oh, we're going to go with these 2 other people. And there were people that I trained. And I had, the person that I was talking to you about earlier, who was one of the higher ups there. And he was like, hey, just, keep your head in the game. You're going to be.
Or did he like pull you to the side and like give you a pep
in the stairwell
talk?
And he was like, hey, like, you're up for manager, or like, not manager, like team lead next go around, like just keep it up. And so I applied to be a team lead around kind of like the middle of rec, and been doing a bunch of stuff, making like all the reserve ahead.
And for context, at rec time, you were doing like 4,000 customers a day.
Yeah,
just about.
We were probably the busiest place.
4,000 customers a day.
A day, wow.
So I get
more than that.
I get pulled up basically, and the gist of it is that the GM at the time was like, hey, I wanted to talk to you about your application for, team lead. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. He's like, yeah, let's go talk about it over here. Like it was towards the end of the day. And I was like, yeah, we'll see what it is, whatever, And his words to me were verbatim, like, I don't think you're qualified enough to merit having an interview, so I'm not going to give you one. How does that sound?
What?
Oh, yeah.
How does that sound?
How does that sound? And I was like, just
what was there anything that happened in the interim that like sort of made them?
No, basically there was no interview. I didn't get an interview, so I was I was denied an interview.
They just didn't want to give you. They didn't put you on the track.
No, they didn't.
This was the same person who encouraged you to go for the position.
Yeah, and so it was one of those things too, where it's like,
and that's verbatim what they said.
Yeah, verbatim what they said to me across the table. It was like brutal. What I think had happened is that like I had a very comprehensive and like hands-on approach with training, because like I was trained by some of the people that had started with the business or, with the company, and they were very thorough. And like, I'm a very thorough person, and I'm also like very much like a people person. And so, when I'm training people, like I'm trying to train them to like the standard that I was trained to, but also like how to be a comprehensive person that like knows how to communicate and take care of people. Because a big part of being a PSA is and it's kind of fucked up now that I think about it, but you're like a medical professional, but like not really at all.
That's the thing that
you're a human that someone's talking about. People are coming to you with like, I have depression, or I had a lady come up to me, not to get derailed, that was like, one of my managers was like, "Hey, Alex, I was in med. Like, can you take care of this customer? They're seeming, or this patient, I should say, and they're having a really hard time. Do you think you could take care of it?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. I'll hop right on that." And this person was basically like, "Before I came here, I almost decided to kill myself," or like basically that verbatim, like off myself or something. And I ended up talking to this person for like 2.5 straight hours, not quite off a ledge per se, but like, and so like literally, and it's like that sort of stuff. That's like not commonplace, but that is the spectrum of like, people will come to you, be like, what's good, man? And then the other half of that is like, so I'm really struggling with the loss of my daughter or whatever. I was about that because it's like, I can help people just by being a person that can like listen and be empathetical and like, be a safe space to a degree for people. And it's like, people do self-medicate with weed. And I think weed has, many medicinal purposes to it, even if it's just something that puts you in a headspace that allows you to kind of,
even if it's just a dissociative, right?
Or, whatever it, and so I was cool with that, but it's also like, that's the spectrum of the job. And so like when I'm, training people or doing that, I want it to be comprehensive, so you want to be kind of hands-on. You want people to have like a good idea of like heuristically, like what to do in a situation. Sure. You can't just be algorithmic with people. The problem with nepotism in workplaces is that when you have people that are competent and passionate, they're a threat to people that are
Lord, I know that.
Not. And so that's what I ran into with my managers and people that had been there slightly longer than me.
Would you say that was the major reason why you left?
I left because they engaged, in my opinion, in a lot of like, just illegal union busting related things. And I had, interacted with them so many times and been treated so disingenuously and like, frankly, discriminated against. That story I just told you, we had discrimination training months later. And I was like, I was discriminated against. I was like, oh shit. Ironic that you provided me with this training because you have to. And it was one of those things where, the company is, they assume people don't know any better. Right. And so they're going to, and that's just corporations. They just do that kind of stuff. And so,
especially the larger, larger scale businesses out here. Definitely.
Not everybody's
our industry.
Well educated in corporate law and in corporate tactics and strategies. Right. So it's like, I learned early on in this industry, I was like, oh, so with the HR, human resources, they're really, you forget a lot of times being in industries, I think what happens is normal people they fall into this trap where, oh, we're going to spearhead our life and our career with our passion. And then when you hit that wall of corporate, you're just like, nothing makes sense. Right. But then at the end of the day, you realize that HR, for example, they're not for the people. They're not for the employees.
For the company.
It's crazy.
For the company.
It's heartbreaking.
But you do have to create a paper trail with them, unfortunately. Exactly. And you got to screenshot it. Yep. And because, I literally, our company got acquired. They erased all the emails on the server. Wow. And I have mad screenshots of all of them,
Wow.
And,
that's just, wow.
they were doing things. And part of it too, what's funny is that given we're in Massachusetts, right? And so like Massachusetts has very different laws than let's say like I'm just going to go the other side of the East Coast. Let's say Florida.
Right.
There's very different labor laws.
Yeah, big time.
So sometimes people in different states, corporations know how to loophole, screw people over, and they can kind of do it. But then like they come here and they just like don't think about the fact that they're in a different jungle. And so, our company got tripped up a bunch because they were doing a bunch of things that may have flown in another state that do not fly in Massachusetts. That was, that was a big problem. That was a learning curve for them.
What happened to your gratuities? Like if somebody gave them to you at the register, because I want to know.
This is a huge thing. So
speaking of labor law,
we had multiple meetings. I remember where they were basically like, we just like don't like the idea of you, like literally this. We don't like the idea of you guys being tipped at all,
right?
Because of like the message that it sends.
Because you're medical.
But we were recreational for also while this was happening too. Just like they didn't like the idea of it. And so what they were like, okay, so like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to poll all of you guys. And if you guys have a charity that you want to donate to, we'll pool all the tips together and we'll donate them and you'll get to choose. And that'll be like a nice thing that we can do. But so the problem with that is that it's a tax write-off for the corporation.
Yes.
And they are taking tips. You can't do that.
Yeah.
It's not legal. And the problem is that they framed it in such a way and everyone was like, oh, that's a nice thing to do. And it's not really that much money.
There were really people on your staff that said that? Like,
yes, because what happens is that they hire people with certain trades.
How
seriously?
They hire because if you frame it like, well, we really don't like, and I can't say that this is exactly what I heard. What I infer is that they would do something like this, where it's like, like it's not, because here's the thing, it's not like every single person is giving you tips, like, but over the course of whatever though, tips are accrued at some point. No, it's wild. But so later I learned that's just wage theft. One of the biggest sources of theft in the United States is just wage thefts, where corporations will just literally not pay people things, and if they don't catch them, then you didn't know, because what's $50 on like a $1,400 paycheck? Like, I guess it was $1,341 this week.
But because at the end of the day, for most laws, it's like it ain't fucking illegal if you don't fucking report it.
Right.
Like if nobody reports it, then this ain't shit going on.
Right.
Even if it's going on. And it's funny that you brought that up, not to interrupt, but like, guys, that sounds familiar as fuck, or is it just me?
Yeah.
We lost a real great lead on our staff, literally from that same shit. It's insane.
Well, yeah, because
it's insane.
I mean, guys, like the big thing, and anyone listening, the big unfortunate thing is that companies will, basically they want you to have a limited lifespan to a certain degree, unless they find that you're going to be super compliant. I don't mean in the like compliance, like CCC setting. I mean, that's a factor, but like, I mean, compliant and like to do what the company wants you to do and say what they want you to say and act how they want you to act. And so it's one of those things where you just have people that are yes men or whatever get, pushed really high. And I mean, it even got to the point where I made a lot of noise about, them not wanting to keep, I was like, do you have any plans for like employee retention? And it got to a point where there was a meeting where, we had the VP of the company there, and this was right around when COVID was happening. People are like, look, like even Disneyland's like closed. Like we're still seeing hundreds of people a day, and they're like, well, the CCC guidelines, and if Boston wants to shut Ruck down, or the mayor, we won't fight it. They fought it when it happened, and they just wanted to keep stuff open. I mean, we literally had people from the the Biogen conference that brought COVID to Boston. Those people were visiting the store, and we're there, and we saw them in their vests.
Yikes.
And we're like, you're not really doing much to limit this. And they used to have it where people would come in and they would snake inside the main lobby in like a perfect tower defense pattern, where I was like, you're jam packed. Actually, I said that, and a few of the gamer coworkers I had were like, oh my God, that's too real. And it got to the point where I was like kind of saying like, I was like, I might just be speaking for myself. I don't think I am. And kind of like 20 minutes, 30 minutes into the conversation, I said that again, and everyone else spoke up, and they're like, you're not. They're putting all of this on us. And like, they weren't even willing to do really anything initially to like protect us in the beginning of COVID or anything, like just trying to keep the numbers as up as they could. Who can blame them? They're probably making $1 million a week. I mean, just like you were saying, I mean, we were, I would say we probably saw anywhere from 1.5 to 3,000 people a day. Okay. So you times that by just any number, say $50, $100. I mean, you do the math, it's
hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And that's low end. I mean, people, anyways. So unfortunately, they will hire people that are, willing to play the game to the detriment of others. I mean, I had coworkers that were like, literally like, nah, like I don't want a union right now because like they're only going to kind of get in the middle of this, and the company's already kind of scared that we have these union talks under. But you want to know the best part about this? Our company spent approximately like $10 million on union busting consultants.
10 million.
I want to say multiple millions of dollars, according to the source that I have. Right. For the union who is sleuthing and follows that sort of stuff.
Right.
And so like the thing is that this is not uncommon, because what it is, it's about creating like a not like a caste system, but like basically they want to create an environment where where labor has no bargaining power. Because what's crazy is that they make record-breaking profits.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the cost of everything goes up, but like we can't pay you more. It's like, well, the cost of our labor goes up. But like what's crazy is that if you're not making, and this is anyone, if you're not making money up with inflation, like if inflation went up 9% this year and you didn't make a 9% increase in your wages, you took a pay cut.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I was working, we had a tier system of you start at $15 an hour, you work for 6 months, and that goes to $17.50. 1 year later from that date, you get 20, which is where I was at, when I was leaving. And then it was something like that for all the people that had been there a few years prior.
And so
they were making maybe 23, 24, 25 an hour, depending.
Christ.
But because they had to pay people that much to get it started, because it was a lot of work, because medical had so much more compliance related stuff. I was still there. We were in the middle of a union election, more or less, and they like fired I don't know, hundreds of people.
And they
basically said, "Oh, it's COVID, it's this and that." But
they called it the Great Purge.
Yeah, they just basically got rid of it. And the thing is that like I could have went back to work. They were like calling me back basically, and I was like, "You guys have not demonstrated to me that you've done anything to mitigate the fact that we could get COVID at any time." And it's like, if you guys just went to reserve ahead only or something like that, or like did something where it's like people aren't coming directly in the place, because 90% of the business is the reserve ahead online.
Yes.
Especially during rec. That's all, it's all we'd be doing. And so, they just weren't willing to do it. And then they tried to play the card of like, well, we accept your resignation. I'm like, I'm not resigning.
How did they go from that to that?
Well, because that's what they do. Because what they say is, we accept your resignation. You're like, you have to say, provided you're not resigning. It's like, you want them optimally to be firing you, right? Because like, you're not trying to leave and they're trying to force your hand. Because you're like, I don't feel safe. Like, you're still seeing hundreds of people a day, and you put up some plexiglass screens. Like, I know that that even if this is cough or sneeze related, that's not how fucking pathogens work. Like maybe someone can't sneeze directly in my face. Doesn't mean if 100 people out of 3,000 people coming in here in a day have COVID, that I'm not going to get. Besides the point.
Bottom line, it's basically at that time in our industry, because I was working in that time. It was really like when COVID first hit, people were literally thinking, this is a life or death type of situation, and a lot of us are fucking facing.
For some of us, it was.
That's the overhead. Yeah. That's really the overhead. So I can't blame you when you're like, yo, and despite of this, we don't know if it's that severe or not.
Right.
You guys want me to go back.
Right. And still see hundreds of people. It was more the principle, like, okay, yes, I'm obviously like as a individual, I'm concerned for my own well-being, one, but two, it's like you are allowing the congregation of people not only from other towns, but other like states and countries, which I'm glad. It'd be cool to see people come from China, for example, and be like, they would come here for weed tourism. I would have a Chinese passport in front of me, and then because you can't do that in China. It's cool. They're in America. They can do that here, and that's great. And but so it's like it's cool to see people from all over the world, and that's cool. But it's really a bad idea during a pandemic is congregating a bunch of people who live all over the world, and then lining them up in literally like a snaking single file line where they're all grouped together for 20 minutes at a time, and then dispersing them back off to wherever they're going. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just irresponsible. And so like kind of to segue back, I would tell the vice president during this meeting we had, like you can't be serious. You can't in all good faith even try to defend you. You have no legs to stand on, basically. And they resorted to basically being like, crocodile tears, like, guys, like, this is a lot. Like, like I'm gonna try to get you answers. And it's like, you're the president of this part of the company, and you're telling us basically you have nothing for us, which tells me that you're just a mouthpiece to mollify or placate us, and that was a big turning point. So this is getting into kind of more stuff, and this is just kind of corruption in the industry. But I talked to the person below them, the regional manager at the time. They got scared, and so they arranged a meeting with me, which I realized I should have maybe been more tactical about. But I laid it out for him. I laid out like all these things we were doing. Like, so they used to have these desks that were literally 36 inches. So, and then you'd have those racks that were right above you, right? Okay. So what you'd be doing for hours all day is overextending to reach, and you're reaching, you're grabbing the bins. And what would happen is we'd send these bins this way, but they'd get caught on each individual rack because it's multiple racks. And so we'd all occasionally have to do this with all the and move them. And we're talking about like not like a few dozen. We'd be doing when things heated up 200 to 300 orders an hour.
So this is like
all day long. Wow. We'd show up at like 6 in the morning
style fucking,
and there'd be 350 orders, and they would just keep printing. All the tickets would be all over the floor. So, we'd be doing that, and like people were getting like shoulder problems, and it was also just miserable. And so, but like all these little things, and it got to the point where, I'm having this meeting with the regional manager, and I'm just kind of detailing like, oh, so like, the system that you implemented is super buggy. We're having to do like multiple steps. I did a 2-3 page write-up because like the regional manager was like, well, if you want to make any changes in this room henceforth, like I'll help you do that. But like you need to basically do this like homework assignment that I don't think you're going to do. Management, like not to say that every manager, but many managers just don't like, they're not actually necessary. It's not to say that they don't like have good intentions. Problem is that they don't actually have enough power to change anything. And it's like, if you're just a super employee, that's fine, but like, let's call it that and move on. And what I learned is that like the regional manager was like, well, you're getting spot bonuses for all that stuff, right? And I was like, we get bonuses? And she was like, yeah, you should be getting like, like whenever you guys like kind of undertake these little projects or do something, you're supposed to get a $250 bonus. It's a spot bonus. Right. So I learned that the managers were more or less just pocketing these bonuses.
Wow.
There was just no recourse for that whatsoever because we never saw a fucking cent of it.
So how long did you last in it?
Like 2 years.
2 years.
But like, the problem was that like I was like, we were doing, just insane amounts. I don't think it's that busy right now. Like relative to what it was when we were
especially
at
that place, like
it's a really weird period right now in the industry.
Well, the market's way more saturated now. There's way more dispensaries. Weird. So you want to know what's crazy? OSHA and the dispensaries don't mix because OSHA is a federal thing, and so OSHA was actually called numerous times. What I had reported at our job or my former job, and like basically they were like ignored. Because like they don't really have jurisdiction, but like they also like should because the CCC basically didn't really have that kind of oversight. Like I said, like people were quitting because like they'd have like, you do this motion 100, like let's say each person like 100 times in a day where you're overextending. You start to like pinch these nerves in your shoulder. This hyperextension seriously over and over and over again while you're basically standing at a sitting level desk. So you're like this. It's like both extremes in both ways. It's an ergonomic nightmare. We're literally like, let me solve the problem for you. And they're like, fuck you. No. It's like the cardboard thing for me. It's like literally like I'm arguing with a manager being like, this is an idea that costs you guys nothing. Absolutely nothing. And like, basically like, we're going to take 10 minutes to do this. And it made everybody's life. We had like 3 or 4 iterations of said cardboard slide. If you're like trying to say, oh, this is a hazard, but this other thing that you've baked into the scenario, it is like clearly people are have quit because of it or gone to the doctor or like, whatever. And it's like, you're just going to fucking say, it's just cherry picking. And I do think it's part of making sure employer retention stays low. They have high enough turnover. They don't have to deal with anyone catching wise. It's one of the unfortunate things because they really, I can say for me, when I started at that job, I was like around 25. And I was really like, it was really sold to me as like, here's a place where, maybe you're not going to get filthy rich or anything, but like, you could theoretically, start at 15, you're 15 to, like I was saying, 1750 to then 20. And then from there, pending maybe a promotion of some sort or whatever, maybe you'd be making in the 25 to 30 range. This one particular company, when we went rec, they were like, we're going to give you guys a nest egg. We're going to give you stock options.
Oh my God.
You got to hold off though.
Yeah.
Okay. Because like the companies were merging and we went from our original company to the one got bought out. They were like, really carroting us with that the whole time. I mean, when they were like stripping stuff away from us basically the whole time, and they were trying to cut hours and doing all this stuff. And I know that a similar thing happened with you guys where they're cutting hours surreptitiously, like, we really can't. And it's like, what are you doing? Like,
they're playing
overhead.
Attrition, and essentially. They're waiting for people to quit.
Right.
So what do you do? Like, do you work now? I have to imagine.
Oh yeah. So I work at my dad has a mechanic shop.
No shit.
In the area, it's been open for almost 40 years. So I'm technically a licensed safety inspector. That's like you could do that in an afternoon. But like when you have like a sticker on people's cars.
Yeah.
So like that's something where you do like an 8-hour class basically, and you get credit to do that. But so I do that. I do like oil changes, brake jobs, rotating tires.
That's cool.
It's fine. I'm working with my dad. It's nice to spend time.
You make good money, I bet.
I make okay money.
Yeah.
The business itself makes okay money, but I'm living with my parents right now for free. I just moved back there after living out and about for, the past decade. I make enough money, but it's one of those things where the weed industry really burned me by the end of it. It was really, and it's really by design. Like I can't stress that enough. Like it's not like, now that there is a big saturation of businesses, I really can't say, I can say with even less confidence because now it's even more diffused than it was before. But when it was very consolidated, like, they could pull all the dirty corporate tricks they wanted to. And I mean, as far as I know, like our company violated a bunch of federal laws with regards to union busting stuff. Like I observed like a manager basically taking people. It's like this stereotypical thing where they take a person and, I overhear the TL being like, we're sorry. Like, because of the union election, we can't give you that, like your scheduled merit-based raise. Cause, like I said before, it's like, $15.
Because of the union election.
And what they were saying is that we can't do that because it's illegal. It's the union's fault. The actual context of that is that the company can't give or take away money from someone in order to incentivize them, to vote yes or no.
Right.
But especially because these raises were like time based and provided you didn't majorly fuck up, which I don't think anyone did in that way. And in that, you would probably be fired before, or whatever. But, provided that. And they were basically, and I watched and listened to that happen. Like, I know that happened. And I know that they did it one person at a time so that not everyone would be. And like that is inherently illegal, you know what I mean? And I'm not even saying that those team leads knew. Part of it too is that you don't, it's like you don't want the ecosystem to be overly rewarding because you want like part of it is they want there to be a certain amount of turnover because people step up when they have the wherewithal or like, like you put certain people in a certain setting and they do the thing because that's, their inclination.
Which is ridiculous that like, a company in an industry that brags about like making, billions of medical itself is just like, I mean, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars.
That's still tax revenue.
Like for us to be fucking not even given wages that pace that inflation, like why the fuck wouldn't we be getting paid at the same like increase of inflation at the very least? And we're not even getting that.
You don't have organized labor.
Yeah,
they can replace you. That's the big caveat, guys.
Right? Yeah.
You can be replaced because they'll do it.
Right. I would actually love to have multiple guests on for that sort of show. Just for the ethic of actually like talking about. Right? Yeah, like having multiple people on talking about like the concept of organizing weed labor because it doesn't need to be a conversation because it is literally the only way that we hold power against the employers. Speaking of episodes, I mean, we're running up on like, unedited, we're almost 2 hours. And honestly, we're going to edit this down. We're going to, come back down to a more refined product. We all wanted to thank you for listening. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for being on. For being our second guest on this show.
Absolutely.
You know,
Indo Valley
wanted to thank you. Caddy wanted to thank you for doing, production over here. And basically, we'll look forward to you next time. Thanks for listening, everybody.